All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Chasing Shadows. I'm Eric,
I'm Dan.
and are we in for a lesson tonight? Um, just watched some videos with Dan, and it's really, really interesting. It opened my eyes to just a different way of thinking, actually. Um, this is going to be based, I guess, loosely on religions of all type. It's not picking out any particular one. This is just talking about some tablets that were found way before Christianity, and I believe even some of the Jewish religion. Right? This goes way,
yeah,
way,
it
way
goes
back.
yeah, it goes behind that.
So why don't you go ahead
It's a
and
little controversial topic, and again, we're just presenting it as
food of thought?
yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean what we're saying is true. Who knows what's going on? It's at very least it's an interesting story, but and it goes much beyond just religion. I mean, there's a lot of history involved, and I don't know. As you'll see, there's a lot of different thoughts to it. But, so yeah.
I guess what we should probably start is, if I can do this before this changes. Oh.
It's going to cycle through
I was
anyway.
trying to see if we can. All right. Well, let's go on. There'll be some photos we'll put up periodically, and you'll see some different things that'll give you a visual.
We'll have a little slideshow from different, Sumerian tablets and art type things. It kind of goes hand in hand what we're talking about.
So let's get into with the Sumerians.
All right, yeah. So we'll just do a little basic, thing on the Sumerians. They're widely accepted as the first real civilization that we know about. We're talking about 6,000 years ago or so, in Mesopotamia, which they call the cradle of civilization.
Now that's where everything was supposed to begin.
Yeah,
Right.
yep.
Human modern life as we know it.
That's what, modern, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because when they get into, science, history, and stuff, they talk about, cavemen and things like that. But we're talking about, like modern civilizations here.
Okay, cool.
Whether or not you believe they truly are the first one, or if there were older civilizations, I mean, people have different ideas on that. But we'll just talk about that. And the Mesopotamia region, for people that don't know or are a little unsure of, but we're talking about the areas around Iraq and those spots. So anyways, about 150 years ago, a lot of these clay tablets were found in I can't remember where the city was, but we're talking about modern day Iraq now, and thousands of these clay tablets were found. They were written in this style of writing called cuneiform. You'll see when we put up the pictures, there's some examples of it. It's really like that's one there. It's like a pictograph thing. Don't you have to hit the transition thing to do that?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna put that up now. So okay, so here's an example of a cuneiform, and people started translating these and got some really interesting stories out of them. One of the most famous people is Zechariah Sitchin, who a lot of people do not believe in his translations. They think what he said was wrong. Whether or not that's the case, who knows? We're just gonna talk about what we've learned about. So Sitchin goes on to talk about these beings from another planet in the solar system, and these beings were called the Anunnaki. And to the ancient Sumerians, these were their gods. When you hear about the word gods, it's kind of taken in a different context.
Okay.
But so what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about what's in these tablets, and I don't know, just kind of go from there. But you have any questions before we kind of dive into it?
Well, one of the things that I found amazing was, if you actually read or get these tablets that are translated, which a gentleman that you showed me did do, he actually was able to take these and get physical copy, I guess, picture copies of these, and were able to break it down and translate it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, if he because you can actually see some of these tablets at a museum. I believe in London there's the 7 tablets of creation. Now this was from Babylonian civilization. It's called the Enuma Elish, and actually right on the screen right now are the 7 tablets. As you can see, they're quite broken. There's pieces missing, but based on what was translated from them, they tell a very interesting story. Again, whether you believe this is just story time, somebody making it up, or the translations are wrong, I mean, that's your prerogative. But people are able to translate these themselves, and there's a lot of, at least a few that I know of, that their translations are coming up the same. And while Zecharia Sitchin may not have got it all correct, there's a lot of it kind of coincides with what other people are getting here. Actually, I'm going to give you 2 names of people who have done translations, and they really corroborate each other. And one is Gerald Clark. He's an author, an electrical engineer. He's got a YouTube page that I check out sometimes. He's just a fountain of information, and seems like a really cool guy on top of it. Another one's Mauro Bellino. He's from Italy, and he was actually hired by the Vatican to do some translations. And in the midst of his translations, they fired him, and it just seemed kind of odd. I'm kind of thinking that maybe they didn't like what they were hearing from his translations, because as you'll find out later, if you take these things as being true, it puts a huge wrench in some people's beliefs. But yeah, that's it's kind of like a little background on that.
Well, the other thing that I was amazed by too was how the correlations between this and some of the Norse gods and the Greek gods, Roman gods.
We'll get into that a little later. And I can even I probably won't show it, but we'll talk a little bit about this genealogy table that Gerald Clark actually put together. Very interesting stuff.
Now, my question to you is, how did you stumble upon this?
Well, you remember the show Ancient Aliens that came out?
Yep.
Quite controversial show. But the whole ancient astronaut theory pretty much stems from, Eric von Daniken's work. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a pretty popular book. And then Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet, which is a, translation of some of these tablets and kind of the story that goes along with it. Again, many people, I'd say most, don't believe that this is a true story. It may be all BS, but when you kind of, get the basis of it, a lot of it makes sense. So, who really knows? It's at the very least, it's an interesting story.
Well, this one is an interesting one we should put up here, if it'll last for a minute.
Yeah, that shows a couple of the tablets that we showed a second ago.
Okay.
The Enuma Elish. That's the Babylonian epic of creation. I'll actually start, before I get into those, I'm just going to kind of say that when a lot of these tablets were discovered, these tablets, 3 of them in particular that I'm going to talk about are the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. But there was many, many thousands of tablets that were found, and they had everything to do from contracts to land deeds to marriages to laws. So everything, these people wrote down everything. And
do you think that maybe at one time, and I mean, who knows, but it's really amazing how through time we are taught religion through passing down from generations and churches and beliefs and everything else, and it's really amazing that when you stumble across something like this, you look at it and you go, this really is exactly, most of the stories, one of them is of Noah, which blew me away.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that too.
And it's just amazing how these stories, the timelines link up. From a person looking back, it's easy for us to pick apart stuff and go, oh, well, they got that wrong, they got this wrong. You have to think about this, though. This was done before there was any modern technology that we know of, and these people
That we know of.
yeah, that we know of, and that's the key. They knew there were planets in our solar system,
Advanced knowledge of astronomy, absolutely.
and they knew about things that still blow me away, which kind of goes, correlation also with the Baghdad battery, because they had all of this technology that they knew about. How do you stumble across, well, we'll make a current and make this gold stick to this stone or this wood, or, there had to be a helping hand somewhere. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not, I mean, you've got people that are rubbing sticks together to make a fire, and now they're gold plating stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's a quite jump in technology from, like we mentioned, 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, a computer would fill up a whole room, and today we got one in our pocket and we make phone calls from it.
It's amazing.
Listen, how do we know, that this really wasn't the way it actually was, and from it we took lessons and we made it a little bit easier to understand. We critiqued it, and we got modern religion from it. I'm still in the belief that there isn't one, and I don't like talking religion, but I really believe that most religions kind of base on the same process, that you be good to one another, you help one another out, you feed one another, you make sure that you see somebody struggling, you pick them up, you try to be the best person you possibly can. And essentially these tablets were talking about all this stuff and lessons that you learn from making mistakes, and also how the land changes and devastations and everything else. I mean, it's amazing. I'm blown away from what I saw so far.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up now and
okay.
Let's get back to
you ready
this.
for story time?
Let's do the
I
story
tried to
time.
give a little bit of a introduction as best I could.
Okay.
I'm not a scholar in this stuff. I've done some reading. I've watched some videos. I'm by no means an expert.
Nor am I.
But I'm fascinated with it, and I'm basically just going to try to regurgitate, things that I've, listened to and read about. So,
That's such a nice way to put
it. So I mentioned 3 specific documents earlier, and the first one I'm going to talk about is the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian epic of creation. Now, this is a 7-tablet story. A lot of it's missing. They're broken. But there it is again on the screen. There's been, multiple people that have translated it. I mentioned some of them before. So I'm going to give the basic story about what's going on here. So they tell this in allegory, or kind of like a, what's the word I used before? I'm having a brain lapse here. Anyways, they kind of talk about how our solar system came into being, and how we got here too. So let's see. Supposedly, these beings that are talked about, the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, which means from heaven to earth came, and the kind of patriarch or the king of that civilization was known as Anu. He was supposedly the king of a planet called Nibiru. Now you hear a lot of Planet X stuff. Supposedly this is the Planet X that comes into our solar system once every 3,600 years. The Enuma Elish talks about how their planet Nibiru was captured by our solar system somehow and ended up in a retrograde orbit that came around in what they call one shar, being 3,600 years, so that would be the orbital time. Now, where was I? Okay, I remember where I was now. Now, supposedly due to radiation problems or whatnot, they were looking for gold to put in their atmosphere to help shield them from this radiation. Every time their planet came in close to our sun at is it perihelion what its closest, or aphelion? I don't remember, but whatever means the closest. So the plan is to, send their fleet over to Earth, or Key as they called it, and look for gold. So down in South Africa, I believe was where their first mines were, and they sent a bunch of workers led by an entity known as Enki, which actually translates to Lord of the Earth. He was a geneticist, a scientist, and he led a bunch of workers, which were called the Ijiji, to these mines. This was approximately 450,000 years ago, according to what these tablets say. Now, mind you, I'm not saying this is fact. I'm saying this is what the tablets say. This could very well just be a nice story that somebody put together. So anyways, they were there doing their thing for quite some time. In the midst of this, Enki's half-brother, who went by Enlil, which translates to Lord of the Air, was sent to Earth to try to speed up this mining process. Their father, Anu, gave Enlil command of the planet over Enki. So the two of them were at odds quite a bit. What it came down to, though, is they started assigning different territories for each, one of these people, or gods as they were known at the time. Enki got the African region, and Enlil ended up in the Mesopotamian region. Excuse me. They also had a half-sister who was known as Ninhursag, and she's known by other names as well. Get into that a little bit more later. But she was a medical officer. So, fast forward a little bit, the workers, the Ijiji, started getting really tired of doing this hard toil and mining, and they wanted to come up with some easier ways to do this. They went to the council and asked if they could put together a primitive worker to, in essence, be a slave for them and do the work for them. This is apparently where we come into the picture. They use some crazy genetic stuff. This is beyond my understanding. And Enki, being the lead geneticist here, was able to mix his DNA with some DNA of whatever was on this planet at the time. I'm guessing Neanderthals. And come up with what we consider modern day humans. So this is not to say that he created humans, but they, according to this, at least genetically modified us and kind of jump-started the evolution of humans. So for you religious people, I'm not claiming, nor is the tablets claiming, that they invented the human soul.
Nor am I.
This is supposedly them just kind of tweaking the container that it comes in. What's a really scary thing that comes out of this, too, is when these, primitive workers were made, they were called the Adapu, and that kind of goes along to where the name Adam comes from. And apparently one of these Anunnaki Ijijis were sacrificed, and the spirit, soul, essence of this person was transferred into the body of this primitive worker. And they actually named this being, I can't think of his name, but that's some scary stuff if this is true. If they were actually able to take the energy of one of them and put it into another body, like, that's some next level shit there we're talking about. So
well, you think about it, back then, sacrifices were really nothing more than an everyday thing. I mean, it was like we want to give the best to the gods to show that we care about them, and who knows? Is it? Listen, knowing what we think we know today, maybe they gave them a drug that made them appear differently and talk differently.
Yeah.
Maybe this really happened. I mean, some of this is hard for me because I'm not so sure about UFOs. I'm not so sure about aliens. I definitely, as you guys know, I don't think it's feasibly possible that we're the only form of life here. Scientists are still kind of baffled about some of the genetic background on us and how some of the stuff they found on certain asteroids are, from outer space mixed with our stuff. And
yeah.
listen,
a lot of precursors to what's needed for life and things.
Hey, listen. All I can say is this gives you another opportunity to open your mind and think, well, what if? I mean,
What's kind of crazy about this too is in it. Oh, I hear Asia getting upset right now.
Oh, she's not liking what you're saying now.
No, I'm thinking one of the other
Oh, the
cats are
yes.
in her space.
They smell the catnip.
Yeah. Anyways, as you'll see, a lot of these stories they'll correspond to other stories you're familiar with, specifically in the Bible. So, without really getting into a lot of detail, because again, I'm familiar with this stuff, but I don't know the stories inside and out,
Right.
and I don't really want to,
And interesting enough, we should let you know that Dan is very, very knowledgeable about Christianity and the Catholic Church because his mom was involved with the organization.
Well, not the Catholic Church, but yeah.
What did you say? She was a deacon, was she?
Yeah,
She was
she's been a deacon in the past.
So
yeah.
I mean, there is. I mean, the family.
I grew up
Yeah.
religious.
Yeah.
I went to church as a kid. I mean, I'm very familiar with the stories in the Bible.
And
So-
that's the thing that when he first told me about it, I said, well, I'm thinking, well, is it possible that somebody made this up from the Bible? You start trying to figure a correlation, and he's like, no, we're talking 4,000 years before.
Yeah, when you see that these stories are very similar, and they were written down before the Bible was even written, so it's kind of interesting. There are so many parallels with the Adam and Eve story that go into this, Numa Lish, word being in the Garden of Eden, and it's the same sort of setup. And they talk about, the forbidden fruit, which, if this is a true story, I believe that, and this is Anki, who's portrayed as the snake in this story, giving them some sort of knowledge, and and I think it had to do with their consciousness. So, again, without really going into detail, because again, I'd have to spend a long time going into it, and I'm not feeling like doing that.
And if people think, slaves weren't around then, that's BS,
Oh,
because think about just even what the Bible has told us about when Moses marched in and freed, the Egyptians. I mean, those were slaves. I mean, listen, there was a lot of, the Bible is filled with a lot of negative stuff. I mean, when you look at it,
Especially the Old Testament,
Oh.
which is where you see a lot of these
Oh.
corresponding stories.
yeah, and it scares you. I mean, it does scare you because you're like, well, this says it, and the word of gospel. But I mean, this just to me, just that it predates modern religion as we know it, and there are so many different principles and stories that just.
And I'm glad you say that too, because there's more to this Enuma Elish story. But the one I kind of want to transition to is called the Atrahasis,
Okay.
and that is the epic flood account. Now, the story parallels the Noah's Ark story, with
Okay.
some different tweaks to it. When you really get through the whole story, you find out that Atrahasis is actually another name that Noah was known by.
Really?
And the other thing I talked about, the Epic of Gilgamesh, he's searching for this Noah character, but in that document he's known as Utnapishtim. So Aziz Sudra is also another name that he was known as. But yeah, in the Atrahasis it kind of goes back over the creation story, more specifically on the creation of the humans, the modern day humans, but it also gets into this flood story. And this wasn't a global flood like it talks about in the Bible. It was more just in pockets of areas. And
But to them, that was the world.
Absolutely.
So it was global to
And,
them.
what was I going to say about that? I was going to talk about how science even talks about, the end of the last ice age, and the dates really correspond to, when this flood went on to the end of the Younger Dryas period, when sea levels changed by over 400 feet.
Isn't that
So
crazy?
it's amazing when you look at this stuff. A lot of it is corroborated with science. again, they could be taking something that's based on real stuff and it was turned into a story, kind of just like today we have blockbuster movies.
Well, how would you know back then? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't
Yeah.
any real source of news except for
Mhm.
a scout going out and seeing this stuff.
If you're interested in this stuff, I would definitely recommend reading the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. Fascinating stuff. Most people are familiar with the name Gilgamesh. He was a king of.
Also,
I
pictures
want to
a
say
cartoon.
Uruk, but I could be wrong.
I keep picturing a
Ooh,
cartoon with Gilgamesh.
I did
or
want
something.
to. I did want to. You're thinking of. Yeah, you're thinking. I know what you're thinking about. Yeah, that was. That
Smurfs.
yeah, that was the cat's name, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot about. I knew I knew the name, but I'm like, where did I know that? Was it?
Or no. His name was good. Azrael was the cat's name, right? Or was it vice versa? I don't know.
I don't know, but yeah, but well, that's
It's interesting.
That's weird.
But when I mentioned this other names for Noah, you know, it's you learn that he was the king of Shuruppak, and you can look this up in the kings list.
Now, Shuruppak is what?
It's another city in that
Okay.
Mesopotamian region.
Okay.
You'll see that the kingships kind of made its way around that area. They had, you know, the kingship in one area. It would kind of get all blown up, and then they'd move it to another one.
Now, my question is when you were, okay, well, I mean, this would be a question, I guess, for anyone to think about. I mean, we'd have to really think about this answer. Back then, royalty was considered almost like a demigod, right?
Yeah, they said it was lowered down from heaven.
Right. So it's not a god, but you would look at this person in high praise.
If you substitute the word alien for God, a lot of these stories start to make a little more sense.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Again, not saying this is true.
Right.
It's
Well-
so interesting though.
Now, a lot of going back to a lot of the Norse and a lot of now because that kind of goes with the name trading that
Yeah,
you said
yeah.
right there, and
Mhm.
you said that Isis, right? Isis was
Isis from Egypt. She's known as like the what was I gonna say?
the mother of
Kind of like the goddess or mother
Yeah.
of civilization.
humankind, right?
That Isis character is the same being that we were talking about earlier, known as Ninhursag, the medical officer. You know, she was the one who carried to term the new creation with the genetics changed. So yeah, she has
You know, it's,
Ninmah is another name she was known
it's
by.
so weird when you think
Yeah.
about something like that because, if this is all bullshit, and I'm gonna stress, I don't necessarily believe it's true or it's false. It's just something to think about.
Mm.
This really kind of goes hand in hand when you talk about these people that say they're being abducted. And where I'm going with this is, how do we know that through interplanes and other dimensions that it's not them coming back to see how we've done so far?
There's a lot of different.
It's just
theories
weird.
here.
I mean, listen. There are caves that are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old that have depicted drawings of things that look like aliens.
Yeah.
And things that look like helicopters. We talked about that.
Mhm.
Tanks, ships, boats, cars. Listen, I mean, is it a guesstimation that people could figure this stuff out? I don't know, because there's so much stuff here I couldn't figure out. I mean, I couldn't figure out how to gold plate a piece of wood or a stone and make that happen. I mean, you know, I'm not Einstein, but that's mind-blowing to me. Like I said, you've got people that are living in the middle of the desert, essentially. Maybe back then it wasn't. Maybe there was a little more greenery and there was a little more life there. They said that the soil was fertile. You'd have to dig through probably a lot of sand to get to that soil. But the idea is that, you know, with these floods also came great changes. So that might have brought the sand in, and that might have killed all the vegetation. You're talking 450 feet of water on top of land that we normally have. 450 feet is definitely going to cover any trees, anything else. Maybe the peaks of mountains you would probably see. But in this valley, which would be their world, their globe was flooded.
You know, it's funny you say that too, because it makes me think about a lot of the mainstream scientists when we talk about old civilizations, like even older than the Sumerians, that most people say, "Oh no, they were the oldest." You know, then you have people who believe in Atlantis and
They're still covered
Lemuria.
water. That
Well,
would
that's the
explain
thing.
why that's covered
Well, that's
water.
the thing. It's like, well, how come we haven't found any evidence of it?
It's
Because it's at
underwater.
the bottom of the ocean,
Covered with sand.
Yeah. How often do you see people, diving down to the bottom looking for?
Think about a flood that the waters are so strong it carves into rock, and all that rock gets pulverized, and now all that sand. That's the sand from the deserts. Think about that a second. That was fertile land. They even said it was fertile land, and if you dig deep enough, they say it's still fertile when they do core samples. So think about it. That means that in these places that we're actually at war with now, we're we're beating the shit out of our ancestors, basically. You know what I'm saying? If even the Bible tells us that we came from the Middle East, for God's sakes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so think about
when you look at all the way these stories line up, it's just
Yeah.
it's. And again, I'm not going into great detail
No,
here,
no.
but
No.
look at the comparison between the Atrahasis and Noah's flood.
How do we know we got to the base of every pyramid? How do we know it doesn't go down deeper? If you're talking
Well,
400 feet of
Actually,
water,
they know that there are lakes beneath the pyramids and the
Are you
Sphinx.
serious?
Yeah,
I didn't
There's
freaking know that.
water under there. Hmm.
And some people believe that some aliens are back in the time when they that was something else that was said. When they had these paintings, these cave paintings of people with big eyes and heads, and you'd swear they were gray people from what you saw in there. They said they came from the earth, right?
Yeah, I do remember that.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. There's some talk too that today even that the government has. There was something you said something was it? I don't know if it was Russia or what. You said they dug down so deep that they actually the government told them or something to cover it up or
Yeah,
something loosely
I
like that,
vaguely
right?
remember reading something about that.
Loosely like that.
Yeah.
That they dug down so deep and they got in trouble or they found something they shouldn't have and they buried it.
Yeah, it was a while ago, so I don't remember the actual story, but I do remember reading something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know.
Yeah.
It really blows me out of the water because it takes everything that I did know and kind of go, let's put it over here for a second. And believe me when I'm saying, I don't discredit the Bible ever.
These stories might go to
go
show that
hand in
these
hand.
Bible stories are true,
Right.
but they're kind of, it's out of context.
It was changed maybe for better understanding, maybe. I don't know.
Or it could be all about who had the editorial oversight of it. Because you learn history from who?
The winners of the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is nonsense. and
You
bullshit.
wanted to talk a little bit about these also known as names.
Yeah. Let's go
Now,
into
Gerald
some of
Clark
that.
did a lot of research on this, so I'm really not going to give like the basis behind it. If
Right.
you're interested in that,
Right.
look up Gerald Clark.
Because he's the man
He's-
who did this.
He's
yeah.
fantastic. And Mauro Bellino is the other one. I mentioned that
Yep.
he did the translating for the Vatican, and then they, out of the blue, fired him. I believe that they didn't like what they were hearing. But
Well, whenever you bring science and religion together, they always clash, and it's just the way it is because one doesn't want to believe the other's true. I'm on that fine line where I believe mostly science because of the repetitiveness of how they get, I guess, their answers to equations, to experiments, to whatever. Science is an amazing thing, but it also scares the hell out of me too. You know, I mean, just to think that at one time these were hand to hand together. Do you know what I mean? They lived in harmony. If these stories are true, then these people lived for the most part in harmony, except for of course the slaves. They're not living in harmony, which is terrible. But
and these wars by proxy that have been fought for many millennia.
you know, and you stop and think about it. If all this is true, and you think about, you know, what's going on now with supposedly, or not supposedly, excuse me for saying that, that's not what I meant to say, with, as a lot of people call it, the Holy War of Israel, going on to this day. It really troubles you because when you think about it, these are the places that all started life.
According to these tablets, who the Anunnaki who was in charge of that land?
No.
Was Enlil, who we talked about a little bit earlier.
Okay.
He was in charge of that land in Israel. Enlil's son, whose name was Nanar, or Nanar Sin, he was the Ajiji worker that we talked about that led the revolt because they were tired of mining.
Okay.
And he was known as Allah in that time.
Really?
And it's also known as name for this person in charge of Israel, Enlil, was known as Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Who a lot of people believe is the God of the Old Testament. And actually that character that he plays really fits that role. He was a military type guy, very destructive. That seemed to be the role he played. He wasn't some all-loving God. But anyways, there was some issues between Enlil and his son Nanar, or Allah. And again, you could see that maybe being the basis of some of these holy wars. You've got two factions of a family member. One's being praised as a god by this group of people, another's being praised as God by another group of people, and there's conflict between them.
Yeah, right.
Right. Just something to think about.
Well, if you replace God with government, there you go.
Another being I wanted to bring up is Enki's firstborn son, who was known as Marduk. Now, Marduk is quite...
He's not Marmaduke.
This guy's full of himself. He bought his own press. Let's just put it that way. He was the one that was in charge of the Babylon region. Now, this was still in Enlil's territory, and he kind of muscled his way in there. So there's a lot of friction between Enlil and Marduk.
Okay.
Now, Marduk, you'll recognize the name that he was known by in the Bible as Baal. When you hear Yahweh in the Bible telling his followers, stay away from that Baal, with the golden calf and whatnot, that's another instance of Enlil and Marduk going at each other. There's a lot of there's a lot of correlation here. Again, whether or not you buy into this or not, the things kind of fall into line. Marduk is the being that a lot of people believe is the person that we call Lucifer.
Okay.
So, again, another little religious connection there. According to some writings that were done, Enki himself is not too happy with his son Marduk. He's been known to call him the rotten fruit of his seed. So there's a lot of infighting that goes on between these families.
Talking about dysfunctional.
And they're all inbred too.
Imagine going to that family picnic, huh?
Right?
Now you also mentioned something about that, and this does go in correlation with the Bible. And please forgive me, I am not very knowledgeable as far as reading the Bible constantly. I read it when I was in Bible studies when I was young, and I forgot a lot of that through the Van Halen concert too. But one of them was you mentioned, and I heard something in some of these documentaries today about through the anger he released nukes or nuked.
Oh, okay. You're getting back to the store. Okay.
I do want to touch base with this because to me this almost seems like
Nanar Sin, who Allah, as we talked about.
Right.
He was the king in the second dynasty in the city of Ur. Now, there's a document called the Lamentations of Ur, which basically talks about Enlil getting permission from his father Anu to go ahead and nuke the city. And the Lamentations are partially talking in like the perspective of Enlil and partially in the perspective of Nanar.
Now, what I wonder is, do they actually use the word nuke?
That I'm not sure about. But, he got the okay to destroy that city while his son was still in it. And from what I remember from the Lamentations of Ur is he's talking to his son and saying like, don't worry about it, just get out of there, just no big deal. And it's pretty messed up, huh? This is this person's father who's nuking his city.
And the correlation that I took from that...
You can actually look up on the Sumerian kings list. If you look up in the second dynasty in the city of Ur, you'll see Nanar as it might be as Nana, but the same name as the king of that second dynasty.
Now, the thing that came to my mind right away when I heard of the mass destruction and stuff was I thought right away of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the destruction that came because it was a sinful place, and it was pretty much a blight to God, you know, and that he destroyed that. Now, if you take that, and I'm taking it out of context, I know I'm not a good Christian because I'm not saying exactly, I'm not quoting the Bible, I'm just simply saying that that land was laid to waste for a long time before settlements came back in, and that would kind of go with correlation with almost saying nuclear. It would have to sit for a long time until, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's another thought that could be, also thought of. It could have been that a natural disaster was coming in, and they just didn't do anything about it. They let it happen.
Could have been a volcano.
Could
have been a volcano,
a comet,
or a
an
comet,
asteroid. And in fact, when we go back to the Atrahasis, basically, what was kind of said was that there was going to be an incoming cataclysm, and the Council of the Anunnakis made a pact that they weren't going to tell humanity that the destruction was coming. So Enki ended up being the being that talked about, talked to Atrahasis Noah, to build the ship to get him and his family to safety. Now, I don't buy this whole all the animals being on it. I kind of think it was a DNA bank. They kind of had DNA samples, and they were going to use that to repopulate. Needless to say, when Enlil saw that a little pocket of people survived, he was pissed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And,
yeah,
so...
Because now his story is getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now, how did they stumble across these tablets, first of all? Was it just,
I think it was, I really don't know, but I just think it just happened. Like I said, they were found in Iraq, and this is only 150 years ago.
And this was in a little wall hole, right?
I'm not sure.
What they said, I thought there was something about it.
I'm not sure.
There was certain documents, or these tablets, that were inside of a jar. That part, am I getting that?
No, that's the Dead Sea Scrolls you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do some of these correlate also with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls have the Book of Enoch in them.
Okay.
Enoch is the great grandfather of Noah.
Okay.
So there is a connection.
Hmm.
There's a lot of just
blows your.
It really does.
Blows your mind when you think of it and that. All right. So.
Enoch's in the Bible.
Yeah. So, I don't even know where to go with this because it kind of blew my mind today.
We have a visitor again.
There she is, our boss.
Hi, Asia. No, don't step on that.
Our boss is there. Oh, there's Asia. She's stepping in to say hello. I still have a hard time because of my belief in UFOs that these were alien beings from another planet. However, you can't really explain it any other way except for that they would have had to been a higher hierarchy of being.
Or a multi-dimensional being, maybe?
I mean, even when you think of God would be a multiple dimensional being.
We're
right?
multi-dimensional beings.
Think about it a second. I mean, so
let's not confuse these people for God, though.
No.
These were not gods in that sense.
They were looked up as a higher power, but there are some questions too that was brought up in Genesis that it didn't say that I created man in my image. It said we created man
in our image.
In our image.
Let us create man in our image.
Yeah. That would tend to be more than one.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be taken out of context. It could have been translated wrong. I mean, that's the thing. What we need to do then is, knowing what we know today, we need to find these scrolls, and we need to restudy them. Don't just lock them up in a box somewhere. I mean, actually, let's.
I mean, there are people that do study them.
Well, I mean, but we should do it on a mass base. No, I mean, report what it's being said. just to say, you know what? Maybe we found the very first Bible.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm not saying that this is something that I'm going to start following tomorrow, but I'm definitely going to read into it because it's interesting. If anything, it kind of makes you realize that what's kind of cool is to think that before Christianity was here, there was always religion. There was always lessons to be learned. There were always cautions to be told. I mean, our lives are based around the unknown. Really, when you think about it, right? And we're always constantly talking about, supernatural stuff. Well, this is supernatural because it's believable because there are facts there. There are some things that are hard to believe, so that's where you as humans we call fiction because we just can't comprehend it.
It's kind of look at the data, interpret it, and make your own decision.
Yeah. Don't let us make your decision, and don't and by all means, don't stop going to church. Don't stop believing God. That's not what we're saying. I absolutely do believe in God. It just gives you another way to look at things, and you go, geez, this is pretty cool. Seeing that this is so ancient now. We're not talking about, some guy in his basement, forged these. We're talking about they were found in a place that was, not touched for thousands and thousands of years. And when they found them, they were like, huh, this is interesting. What do we have here, I did want to touch base.
Did you want to talk about the other or the other names in different cultures?
Yes, because what I also want to do is, on some of these photos that we didn't get to, I was wondering while we're talking if we can just loop some of these in the background. There are some photos. We're still here, guys, but we're going to put these different photos that were found, and these are only a very small. These are 7 photos that we found. The explanation will kind of just kind of give you some nice.
And we showed a couple already.
Yeah. It'll give you a little visual, but maybe some of you guys might stumble on something and go, hey, I looked into that one photo. So here's the photos why we're in the background talking about our next step on this.
All right.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So as you go to different cultures, these beings keep showing up known as gods. And I believe that we're talking about the same beings.
Okay.
But with different names in different cultures.
Okay.
And you'd have to look this up, but there are some areas, especially with Isis, who we talked about, where she has some of her also known as names listed right next to each other on some documents.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you a basis where, okay, if this person had these names, and then this person kind of, come on, Asia. This person shows up here and plays the same role as this other guy and carries the same type of what's the word we're talking about? Because we talked about Enki and how his symbol was the trident. The trident.
Yep.
And who do we know that carried a trident in another place? Neptune.
Yeah.
And Poseidon.
Yeah.
So it's very likely that these are the same being and they played the same role in these civilizations. So, some also known as names for Enki would be Ea, Neptune, Poseidon, in Egypt, Ptah or Osiris. So that's an interesting thing. We talked a little bit about Enlil and, him being known as Yahweh back in the, Israel area. His also known as or Jupiter, Zeus. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Gnostic texts where they talk about the archons. That's a whole other topic altogether.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, but the main, deity behind that, the Demiurgus, is pretty much Enlil. If you've seen Battlefield, what's the one with John Travolta?
Oh, that sucky movie, Battlefield
Earth.
Yeah.
He basically is playing the Enlil character.
Really?
Yeah. We talked about Marduk a little. Marduk has a half-brother known as Ninshida. This is Enki's second-born son.
Okay.
Now, he goes through these different cultures, and Mercury, Thoth, Hermes, Quetzalcoatl, we're talking about the same person. And
Hmm.
Thoth is actually probably his most well-known name. You know, he was known as Thoth in Egypt and Atlantis. There's this document called the Emerald Tablets.
Okay.
Fascinating document. I could do a whole show on the Emerald Tablets himself. Definitely worth looking into, though. But Thoth or Thoth, he is said to have written over 35,000 different books over his different, different incarnations or whatnot.
Okay.
So that's just some fascinating stuff.
What I find amazing is how when you look at these different names
Mhm.
and how many of them you actually know once that word
Yeah,
comes,
you
like
could really
Mercury,
tie them
like, you know what I
together,
mean?
yeah.
These are all. I mean, listen, I I'm blown away by it.
It's pretty
I don't
crazy.
really know what to say, but
And again, I'm leaving a lot out. I'm just
Oh,
kind of giving
yeah.
the basics here.
it's just getting your feet
But
wet.
when you really look at these roles that they're playing over different cultures,
Yeah.
you go, wow, we're talking about the same people. What if these gods of Greece and Rome are actual beings, not gods,
Well,
but
that's
just
that's
a race of people?
that's what I was kind of going into with the demigods almost, because
Yeah.
they're not
We're-
really.
We're talking about someone of that race that mated with a primitive human,
Absolutely.
and that's how you're getting these demigod people.
And I mean, think about it. When you look at people from around the world today, how different we look. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
There's a whole other theory that can go into
yeah,
that.
I mean, when you think about how people from Middle Eastern, they are darker skin, right? Most of them, I shouldn't say all. Most of them are darker skin, and they have that unique look about them from that area of the world. It's amazing because we have a chance to actually peek back into our past, why we're still here, and look at, like you said, the cradle of civilization, basically, from where we believe we came from, or where life first became modern as we know it. I guess would be the best way to put it. It's an amazing thing that we actually have these books that can help us, even if you only use it as a stepping stone and maybe as a guideline, and take it from there. But I do think that we need to definitely look into these ancient scripts more. I'm just fascinating. I'd like to know more about them, because
at the very least, it's an entertaining story.
it is. You know what? If anything, it's great fiction. But I don't know if it's fiction, because there's so much
Yeah.
stuff there that kind of makes you go, huh. I mean, the story of the Bibles from the story of the Bible that I know always amazed me. That the miracles from daily struggles to just basically putting your faith in something more than you, and that'll get you through, and helping each other out, and the battles that you see people have gone through for the years, for good or bad. Battles are horrible. Depending on what side of the coin you're on, they're still horrible. You have all these loss of lives, and these, this story with what you heard today, which just touched base a little bit with the Great Flood.
I mean, it goes into far more detail. So,
But it's just ironic.
This is just a quick crash course.
It's really ironic how it can go hand in hand. There was something else I wanted to bring up really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Going from these different photos that we had. There's a ton of these, by the way, on Google. We had to be very careful. We don't want to do a copyright infringement, so we try to put, like on the bottom where they came from and stuff like that. We're not taking any credit for any of these photographs. These are photos you can find online, so we want to be very careful about that. But there are some really great photos out there too that sometimes a picture says 1,000 words, And some of these, as I was saying to Dan, I'm looking through a lot of these, and I said, boy, I see a lot of correlations and stuff that almost reminds you of almost the Nazis. The big symbols of the big wings and the different symbology. The other ironic thing was watching this this documentary today. The medical cordis, right, is also known as
the caduceus.
The caduceus,
Yeah,
which
that was Ningshita's symbol, and if you notice, that's the symbol that.
is for modern medicine.
Yeah, and also it's Hermes.
That's
The
right.
symbol he carried.
That's right.
That's kind of like where it becomes apparent that these beings are the same being,
Yeah.
playing the same role, carrying the same symbol. So it's interesting.
You know, and if it's not the same person, okay, let's make this a little bit easier.
Or if it's not
on
a
our
real
brand.
person, it's still the same character.
Well, I was going to say, what if back then, you know, your children would carry on a quest for you if you passed away, pretty much
Yeah.
like how it is today. So even if this wasn't the same physical
that's
person,
funny
it's
you
still
say
the
that
same line.
because Enki carried the caduceus before Ningshita did. So there's an instance where the father carried.
Passed it
I mean,
on.
he was a geneticist. You know,
All right.
DNA, the double helix,
Yep.
that represents that same symbol. You know?
Because that is the snake. The snake is the helix,
Mhm.
right? I don't know. Listen,
Fascinating stuff.
I really don't have anything to add to this. For once, and everybody out there who knows me, I'm kind of speechless. So that's wow, good for you, Dan. You finally did it. I can't even put anything into this except for I'm still amazed by it. But you know, I know it's hard for a lot of people to think of extraterrestrials. It is for me too, you know, or even alternate.
The cat scratching.
Yeah, I ignore it now.
Yeah.
It's just home sounds. But even you know, the alternate dimensions and the planes that we talk about. Listen, take from what you will, but I'm gonna look more into this. I really am. I really am.
It's
I
a
think
fun topic. It really is.
I think it's kind of cool, and I've always loved the mythology and stuff of the ancient gods.
Yeah.
Because I always wondered, where did they come from? Well, I guess we have
We
one answer.
might have a possible answer. You know.
You know, whether this is also, fiction, I don't know. But listen, I guess it's all in your perspective of it.
Yeah.
You know. So with that, Dan, what else?
Do you have any questions?
I got a lot of them, but I
Yeah.
don't know if there's answers at the moment because
I'll do my best.
it's rattling around
if
up
you
there.
haven't-
You know what I mean?
If you have any,
Okay, there was a correlation
Mhm.
also with
hi Asia.
a character that they said was also who we believe today was Jesus, right? There was a correlation with one of.
Okay, yeah. Edgar Casey, when talking about his things, I'm sure most people know who Edgar Casey was.
I didn't until today.
Okay,
I didn't
but
until today.
He came up with this thing, like while he was in his trances, that there's this like special type of soul, like the prime soul or something.
Okay.
And this prime soul is the same soul that ended up being Jesus, and apparently, like Hermes, Thoth, is that soul, known as other names before.
Okay.
Apparently he was the first Adam in the Garden of Eden. It's the same soul. I don't know if I can buy that.
I don't know either.
But
it was thrown in there.
an alternate theory that I got from someone else is that this Thoth, Hermes, Ningshita being, is a member of the same soul family as Jesus. Again, I mean, it's an interesting, way to look at it. I don't know. I don't even know what I think of that. I don't think that Jesus was a incarnation of Thoth. I believe Jesus was his own person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've known, and I will always know Jesus as our Savior, and the image of God as a son. But as we know, in most religion, they say that was
Well,
God. in
they say,
certain
yeah, he
places.
was God incarnate.
Yeah. So,
It's strange though, because I look at God as being everything. Like God is part of everything. If you're not comfortable with the word God, you can substitute the word source, or you could substitute the word universal consciousness, or there's ways
higher
around.
being.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways around having to use that word if you don't feel comfortable with it. But again, I don't want to dive deep into.
No, this isn't about going against religion or
going
changing
against
religion.
people's beliefs.
It was just so interesting that these go hand in hand. But what blows me away is how old these are.
Mm.
That's what really. I didn't even know these things existed until, like you said, we started talking about
I truly
them.
believe that our civilizations are a lot older than we're taught.
Well, there's a lot of talk about that too, because we were told through one source that the Earth is millions of years old to billions of years old to thousands of years old to, listen, I know it's older than me.
I want to know why the Sumerian civilization is not taught in schools.
I don't know that, and to me, that would be a good place to be taught. I mean,
if it's the first modern civilization, why does it get skimmed over in school?
I don't know, because I have not heard of this until you and I started talking about this. And, it's, I mean, if it was part of our history, we need to know about it.
I forget, did you ask a question?
I don't know.
Because you said that... Yeah.
Well, my question was...
you asked about Thoth, Jesus, that connection.
Because there was a connection there.
Yeah,
I heard
I did answer that one.
It's... I don't have anything more to really add because I'm blown away by it. I can tell you that there are some great videos out there. Dan, maybe through the link tonight when you link this up, if you can just throw some names out if they want to check this out.
I will. I'll link a couple of YouTube pages.
Yeah. Because I think even if this is all BS, okay, and it quite possibly could be. I don't think it is, but let's just say this is quite BS. It just gives you a little bit more knowledge, some thoughts, some ideas, and think outside of the box a little bit. As we always say every week, don't ever stop asking questions because
and if this is a true history that's been suppressed, I want to know more about it.
I want to know more.
I want to know why it's being suppressed.
And especially since this area has been such an important part of human development, right? I mean, they talk loosely and base about the fertile, right? What is it? The
fertile crescent.
Crescent.
Yeah.
And how this soil will grow anything. Now it's covered by 100 feet of sand or whatever. But I mean, the idea behind this is that you have these areas that are so fertile and basically could feed the world, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you can get down to that soil, think of the stuff we can do with that. Maybe our riches aren't all that we think of as far as gold goes, which I want to bring up something about gold as well. Through histories we've heard of towns made of gold and Mayan gold cities and this and that. What if the gold that they were talking about wasn't necessarily metallic?
Or meant for money.
Maybe the gold was food, was possibly maybe grain, and the wind to feed people.
One thing I didn't mention, one of the names from the Anunnaki is Inanna, who was the granddaughter of Anu. She was known as Hathor in the Bible.
Okay.
She's also known as Ishtar. But anyways, in Hathor's temple, they found this talcum powder-like substance. And they found, it was an alchemical process where they were basically making monoatomic gold, putting it into bread cakes and consuming it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you do that?
But they were,
You're making my head hurt.
What happens if you ingest a monoatomic element, which is a superconductor? If we're energy and we're, Gerald Clark likes to use the term meat modems.
Yeah.
We could kind of get a better signal that way. But anyways, I'm interested in trying to get some of this monoatomic gold. Gerald Clark's wife actually produces this stuff called Starfire Gold. You know,
Okay.
it comes in drops. So I'm kind of interested in trying that out and seeing,
Well,
seeing if it makes any difference.
I'll tell you what. I mean, if it's all natural, it's not a chemical.
Oh yeah,
and,
it's all natural. Yeah.
you know, I mean, these are some questions I have.
Made with sea salt from the Dead Sea. That's part of it.
I got to tell you, listen, being in the culinary world, and I'm sure your dad would tell you this too. Years back, gold wasn't gold. Spices and herbs were everything, and people killed and died and fought battles for it. Just like rice. Rice in Japan was such a tough commodity because that's how they fed the people. Sushi rice is not. People think sushi is the fish and stuff like that. It's not.
No.
Sushi is actually
You're thinking
the
of
caliber of
sashimi.
rice. It's the rice. Sushi is rice, and it is such a clean shook of rice. It's unbelievable when you get a really good brand of sushi rice. It changes your life once you have it. It really does. Where I'm going with this though is, so people had many different depictions of what was valuable. So I mean, if we keep looking at what we think is valuable today, as gold and diamonds and stuff like that, that's what we go after. But back then,
We're not leaving with it. So
no. But I mean, think about this a second. Cities of gold and stuff like that. It may not have been what people think.
It's a good point.
But going back to the gold, now people are going to say, "Oh, that's horse shit." They came down to mine gold in our planet because they didn't have it there. That's a bunch of horse shit. Okay, all right, yeah, okay, let's go with that. It's a bunch of bullshit. These people came from another planet, mined here to get the gold.
I will tell you
But
that there are mines that are found in South Africa.
I do want to say this. Let me throw this
Sure.
out against that, and I'm going to say this. What do we use today to insulate and isolate all of our space products today? Gold.
And why is that? It's a great insulator.
Think about that a second. Right? We use gold to help fight off everything from radiation, making signals clearer. It doesn't tarnish like other metals. It stays pristine.
Even if it's at the bottom of the ocean,
Yeah, I mean,
underneath a bunch of layers.
you wipe it off, and it's as shiny as it was the day it was made. So think about that a second. So why something that's also 4,000 years old that is saying that these beings came from another planet to farm gold to help protect? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
you're talking 4,000 years old, maybe long, maybe older.
and according to the tablets, this was going on 450,000 years ago.
I don't have anything, man, except for.
Yeah, mind blown.
So if this is true, then we're aliens.
Partially.
And somebody once said that, didn't they? We were watching something. They said we're the aliens on this planet. I remember seeing something about that where they said, we're the aliens. And I'm like, that kind of all fucking makes sense now, I guess, if you really.
It doesn't seem like our bodies are really designed for this planet.
Not really,
You know,
man.
it's funny. Apparently, one of the nicknames Enlil had for humans was the stiff-necked creatures or something like that. So, I don't know.
Well, but with that being said, we're going to wrap up tonight's show. To keep you guessing, to keep you thinking, always ask questions, never settle, and always remember that you are not alone. And that might make you want to keep the lights on tonight when you think about it. but with that being said, I'm Eric.
I'm Dan.
Hey, listen, guys, it's been great talking to you. Really quick side note, Karen Kilmartin and I are working on a lecture with Dan. We're going to be doing like a Q&A kind of thing. We also have Jacob, which is Karen's grandson, who's very much involved with this. He's also mentioned he's going to try to do the best he can to help us out with some of our website stuff and also our technical issues. So a big thank you to both of them.
We have some lectures coming up.
We have some lectures coming up. It's going to be very exciting. Once we get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, we will put it out there. But so far it looks like the Black Cat on the 27th of October. More dates and times will be more available. We're working this out. Karen and I are also talking with Dan about possibly getting together and doing the webcast, as well as doing some maybe
And I
some
believe
adventures.
she talked about doing some readings with
Some readings and also some investigating. Possibly
Mhm.
we can put on this show and do some live investigations or
Yeah.
pre-recorded.
I know we've
investigations.
spoken about her before, but for those who don't know, Karen Kilmartin is a highly respected medium here
Yes.
in town. So,
Yes. Not just this town. I mean, she's
well,
getting-
yeah, she's known all over. I'm
Yeah.
saying,
But we first found out through a family, through my family. They had a reading, and then Dan's father got involved with it through the restaurant. They do readings at Scarpelli's restaurant. Great food, great price, always smiling. You can't get a better meal anywhere else for the price. And let me tell you
definitely
something.
not for my price. That's for sure.
Awesome people. Awesome people. You got to stop into Scarpelli's. Tell Dan,
Shameless plugs.
Eric and Dan say hello and bon appetit. But with that being said, though, we did want to finish up the show with thanking all of you who are following us. I think there's 13 of us now.
There's 16. or so.
16?
Not
Wow.
not counting who checks in on Facebook and whatnot. But
Well, and for all
you know,
those who haven't been checking in.
this
check
is
in, check
this
us
is
out.
fun for us either way. So
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. And I'm sure we're gonna get better eventually. But if
Mhm.
not, you're stuck with us.
and we're still having fun.
We're
anyway,
still having
so.
fun. So if anything, it's a great adventure and a great hobby. But we hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight. I love you. God bless you all. Thank you for being
Take
there with
care.
us. Take care. Until we talk again, keep looking up.